we go into the question and answer section, we've gotten some questions through the Q&A panel as well as through the chat panel. So I've collected them here, and we'll see how we can answer them in the sequence of the presentation. So number one is a question for Jitendar: how AMTZ tools and equipment acquisitions were funded. And if we can keep the answers as brief as possible, because we've got about 5 or 6 questions we'd like to answer.
The entire AMTZ equipment and instrumentation are of 2 categories. One, which is the testing instrumentation, which are funded over a period of time under the various schemes of the federal government. 2 is the manufacturing infrastructure, which existed at AMTZ for other products, but for ventilators and diagnostic kits, we applied for a federal grant to support manufacturers with the manufacturing infrastructure, as well as technology transfer costs. And a part of that funding came from international partners.
Related to that, Jitendar, what was the public-private mix at AMTZ in terms of the people who are actually on site at the entire AMTZ city? What's the public-private mix?
So the AMTZ city is run by me and my team, which is part of the publicly funded human resource. We are about 150 people. The rest of the 3,000 people are all private industries.
So it's like 90% private sector and 10% government.
Absolutely. So the idea of the Prime Minister is minimum government and maximum governance. So the government enterprises tend to be facilitators and not the doers.
And the final question for you, Jitendar, that you answered offline, basically the question was, do you see this AMTZ as a model for similar centers of innovation that could be established in other countries around the world? And you said absolutely, global partners must be pooled for setting up at least 10 such centers. Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll move on quickly to Ramses. What political issues do you consider as barriers for approval of medical devices in Mexico?
So the answer to that is the regulatory process in Mexico is not mature enough. And therefore, there are many institutions that do not agree upon what makes a very good medical device. And it's because of a lack of experience, not because of a lack of intention. We do want to move forward to a much better established medical device industry. However, because we are not mature enough, and as I said before, we only have about 8 years that we established a set of rules for medical device manufacturers. So we're still struggling with some aspects of, whether they are political, cultural, or because we don't have enough information or experience. And that creates a snowball effect, because investors do not want to invest in Mexico in a medical device industry because there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty. Therefore, they like to go to the FDA, they like to go to Europe for CE mark approval, and because that opens up a much bigger market. I mean, Mexico is only about 2% of the worldwide market for medical devices. While if you go to the US, I mean, you get about 50% of a worldwide market. And not only that, if you have an FDA approval, you can actually go to about 70–80% of the countries which already accept FDA, as opposed to Mexico, which only about 4 or 5 countries accept that regulatory approval. So therefore, we need to give the investors for medical device initiatives certainty in the regulatory rules so that we can jumpstart this industry.
Okay, related to that, perhaps a little extended commentary. There seems to persist disagreement among biomedical and clinical engineering community around regulatory matters, professional organizations. What do you attribute that to?
The same principle. I mean, the disagreement comes because we don't have a clear set of rules. I mean, if we had, as Jitendar, I'm seeing Jitendar saying yes. if we had something, a document, a certification, an ISO standard that could dictate the rules for a specific medical device that is accepted in country A or country B, there wouldn't be such a disagreement. So because and because everybody's opinion counts, I mean, like we cannot agree and we lose time. I mean, we've seen that with the ventilator. I mean, there were no clear sets of rules for establishing an emergency use authorization for a medical ventilator in Mexico, and therefore we are seeing the outcome of that, which is disagreement upon what makes a good ventilator. So that will be my answer for that.
Okay, thank you. And one final one for you, Ramses. Could you describe any compromises that were made when developing a medical device for COVID as compared to a device for sale?
The trade-off was that we did not have enough time for extensive testing. We would like to compress a lot of the testing, you know, whether it's in vivo or in vitro testing. I mean, extensive and very, you know, we in medical device development, we have the risk assessment methodology to you know, based on ISO 14971 to mitigate all the risks. I wish we had more time to do that properly, and because we have the crisis over and we need those ventilators, there's still many unknown things that we still have not tested extensively the device. That was one of the major trade-offs of you know, of developing a device for the crisis, you know, as opposed to normal time development.
Great, thank you, Ramses. Okay, now to Mladen. The note here says, Mladen noted that we in South Africa have observed that HFNO therapy has much better outcomes than invasive ventilation. I do not see this trend coming out of any other country or region. I guess that could be a comment either to Mladen or to any of the other presenters.
Just in response to that, Fred, I'm not sure where that information comes from, because I think the international experience is that patients that end up on intubated ventilation, that the mortality rate is above 80% in many cases. So, and our patient recovery rate on high flow nasal oxygen is over 70%. So those are two very conflicting and contrasting outcomes. But if whoever asked that question would like to engage with me offline, I'd be happy to do so.
I would just add to his answer. Depending upon the virulency of the case and the extent of ASRD and the impact on the lung, it's actually a clinical decision whether to put it on high flow nasal oxygen or ventilation, invasive ventilation. Yes, the mortalities in ventilation would be higher, but that's simply because the patient was already bad. But majority of cases in ASRD manage well with high flow and nasal oxygen.
Okay, we've got two more questions. One, this is another one to Mladen. Given the fragmented nature of health systems in South Africa, where should the coordination happen? Is there an efficient way for the national department to coordinate across states? That was for Mladen.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. I guess that's a discussion all on its own. I think coming back to the point that Jitendar made, that National Department of Health in our case should be the facilitator and the enabler, and a lot of the action happens in the provinces. Unfortunately, some of our provinces are not adequately capacitated, so National Department of Health ends up doing the work that should actually be done at provinces. So it's really a structural capability challenge for us as a country. There's no easy answer, and perhaps again this might be one of the silver linings that will emerge out of this COVID cloud. If I could just comment, going back to a comment that was made earlier, I think, Fred, by yourself. Another great opportunity is actually for the African region. So linking up to what has been said by Jitendar, by Ramses about their respective countries, but also Jitendar's, if you like, suggestion that this should be a global activity. The WHO project clearly identified the need, in fact, in the desirability of African countries to collaborate. So we see this as a great opportunity for biomedical engineering, clinical engineering, health technology assessment professionals in the African region to collaborate almost on an Airbus model in the development of medical devices that are appropriate, affordable, sustainable for the African region, because many of our devices simply aren't. So again, that's something very hopeful, and of course, we look forward to working with partners in other countries and in other regions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And our final question is from Rosana Rivas in Peru. Health innovation is an improvements driver to the economy. Also, it enriches partnerships between clinical engineers and the enterprises, government, and community. Is health innovation, and this is for all the presenters, is health innovation a sustained process in your country? If not, what do you think is the missing factor or factors for the process to be sustained? Let's see, if it is not in your, so what's missing? Yeah, okay, that's it. Sorry, I duplicated myself. Let's start quickly with Jitendar. What is the missing factor for innovation to be sustained in your country? Just one or two.
Convergence. And the sooner we arrive at convergence, which brings, and I completely agree with Ramses, there is actually no test protocol for a ventilator globally today. We don't know which kind of patient, what tidal volume, what I ratio, should a ventilator be tested for how many hours. And if we can bring convergence between testing centers, manufacturing capability, supply chain, innovators, validation protocols, a lot can be achieved.
Okay, thank you. Ramses? What are one or two missing factors for the process of innovation to be sustained?
I will agree with Jitendra on convergence, which is also translates into the lack of rules. I mean, we do have the rules, they're not very clear. Therefore, that makes the process not sustainable. I mean, nobody wants to invest in a country that doesn't have a clear set of rules, especially investors. So that is the missing factor here. I mean, there's a lot of will to do things properly. However, we also want the government to help us in establishing a clear set of rules for having a medical device industry that can help with the innovation and therefore reduce the cost of health expenditure for the population, for the local population. They don't see it that way. I mean, that must change.
Okay, Mladen, same question to you as the final answer.
So I would respond by actually taking a high level look. So Rosanna said health innovation. So health innovation is very broad, including the processes by which healthcare is delivered. But if we're talking about health technology and health technology related innovation, I think what is required is for governments, as I've said, to act in an integrated, coordinated way with a clear message, but also to realize the broader societal benefits of local manufacture and local innovation, because the spin-off is not just a device that comes out at the end of the production line. It's job creation, it's preservation of foreign currency, and there's so many spin-offs in terms of after-sales support. So I think, and Tom, Fred, you're the great systems thinker here, but my answer would be to approach this from a systems perspective, because there are many pros and many positive and intended consequences that could come out of a coordinated approach focusing on innovation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks to all, bravo to all of us for diving into this enormously complex thing within the time constraints that we've had to work.
Hey, Fred, folks have had to leave, but closing comments from any of the other panelists.
Yeah, well, let me, Mario, just jump in. This is wonderful, I'm very proud, and to look at these presentations, in my world, is something that I learned. There's another factor that's very important, which is, how do we tell the story? Well, what Mladen was saying, in terms of technology, this is wonderful. We can understand each other, but the society benefits, the messages that carry the benefit to everybody of what innovation is doing. The policy and decision makers kind of working on the language, add that, to the skill set for clinical engineer leaders. That I was in a project to say the equivalent of the business case is a political case. We need to be a little bit more skilled with the political sides. Right now, the two key words that I hear, not the projects, the investors, everybody look, what is the relevance and what is the efficiency? So responding to that, we have to respond in terms like that. We need to be visible, and make the world know all the efforts that we're doing. That really, takes us a long way. This is wonderful.
If I could just join in and compliment everybody for what you have accomplished, and also suggest the community and you discuss ways that you could collaborate to expand your work, sharing intellectual property, sharing learnings, so that your products can perhaps fill a niche in the marketplace rapidly. There are several other initiatives around the world. These innovative startups have an opportunity, I think, to create new market spaces that aren't filled by perhaps wealthy companies that are used to selling products at $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 each.
Any others from the presenters? Any other closing comment? Wonderful job, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
Good luck.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.